Okay, so now it's recording. Okay, good. Okay, so again, my name is David Fass, and I'm the trainer at InetSoft, and today we're going to be talking about crosstabs and pivoting data. So before I get started, as I always do, I'd like to tell you that everyone is muted by default. That is, I cannot hear you speaking. So if you're trying to talk to me, you shouldn't try too hard because I won't be able to hear you. However, if you do want to get my attention or ask a question, please type in the chat box or in the question box, and I should see it pop up on my screen. Now, on my end, it's telling me that my mic is on and that my screen is on. So let me just see if somebody could just chat me back and just tell me if you can see my screen and hear me. Oh, and there it is. Somebody was very quick. Thank you very much, Hind. That's great. Okay, so everybody can hear me, so we're good. Okay, and again, if anybody does want to ask a question, by all means, just type in the chat box or question box, whatever you see on your screen, and hopefully that'll pop up and catch my eye, and I'll stop to address it. And of course, you can ask me questions at the end also. Okay, so today's class is going to be, I think, pretty simple and quick, nothing too dramatic here. So what is a crosstab? A crosstab is basically a table that groups and aggregates data in a particular way by using column headers and row headers. So the basic idea is that as we'll see in just a moment, that the row headers and the column headers are basically the groups, right? The labels in the rows, and the row headers and the column headers define the groups, and then the values at the intersections of those rows and columns are the aggregated measures for the corresponding row and column group. So it's a convenient way to present a very large amount of aggregated data. In many respects, it's very similar to a chart. And in fact, they're almost analogous. Chart is kind of the graphical version of displaying grouped and aggregated data, and a crosstab is the tabular method for displaying grouped and aggregated data. And so in many cases, you can display exactly the same data in either a chart or a crosstab, depending on whether you want to present your data graphically or tabularly. Okay, so let's get started with a simple example. So I'm going to close this, and let's see if I can find... okay, so I've got my user portal running over here, and I'm going to open up Visual Composer. And I'll just make it full screen here. Okay, so here's a Visual Composer, and what I'm going to do is create a new dashboard and just illustrate the basic approach to creating a crosstab in a dashboard, which many of you have probably done before, but maybe you'll see something new that you haven't seen before. You never know. So to create a new dashboard, new view sheet button in the top, and as the data source, I'll select our sample order model data source. There's a view sheet. And then basically to add a crosstab and to build a crosstab, you have a couple of approaches that you can do. Pardon me. My preference is to use the crosstab editor, and that becomes available when you drag a crosstab component into the dashboard grid. So if I grab the crosstab component here from the component panel and just drag it in, right, that adds the crosstab, and it also opens this crosstab editor. I find this to be the easiest way to set up a crosstab because it kind of guides you what you need to do. You need row headers, you need column headers, you need measures. Of course, you don't need all of those things. You could have a crosstab with just row headers and measures. You could conceivably have a crosstab with just row headers and column headers, although it wouldn't be very interesting. But this basically shows you what you need to do. The other approach, and I'll come back to this in just a moment and set it up this way, but the other approach is that if you add a blank crosstab like this, right? So I just added a crosstab and then I dismissed the crosstab editor. Incidentally, if you want to get the crosstab editor back, there's an edit button at the top right corner of the crosstab component. But the other way to do it, you'll notice that there's a little hint in the middle of the crosstab that says drag a column here. And so you can do it that way also. So if you wanted to set up a crosstab, for example, with, let's say, company, the company field as a row header, you would drag that field onto the crosstab, and what will happen then is that there's this icon that appears. Hopefully everyone can see that, and depending on where you move on the crosstab, it will display differently. So if I move my mouse over here, it shows me that if I drop it here, I'll get a column header. If I drag it over here, right now it's showing me that if I drop it here, I'll get a row header. So if I drop it, then I get row headers, right, for the different companies, right? That's my grouping, and that's my row grouping, right? Because I dropped the company there, and then I could drop in an aggregate such as, let's say, product total, right? And you notice that the icon now shows me that if I drop this here, it's going to give me the body of the crosstab, or the aggregates in the crosstab. So I can drop that in, and then if I want a column header, let's say something like category, I can drag that up there, and I get a column header, right? And that's a way that I can build up this crosstab. And the structure of this, I think should be pretty obvious to everyone. Basically, you've got row grouping, right? So these different rows here represent different groupings by company. The column headers represent different groupings by category, and then the values at the intersections of the rows and columns are the aggregated totals. So for example, this total right here that I'm pointing at is the aggregated dollar sales for to a company called Daycare One in the category of business, right? So that's the basic structure of a crosstab. So that's one way to do it, by clicking and dragging the fields into the crosstab component. But the other way, as I said before, is to use the crosstab editor, which you can always get by pressing the edit button in the top right corner of the crosstab. And as you can see, the crosstab editor reflects the crosstab that we set up using the other method, by using the click and drag method, right? So the crosstab editor shows us what we've done. We've got company on the row header, category column header, and total as the aggregate. Okay, so these are the two different ways to do a crosstab. It's entirely up to personal preference which one you choose. As I mentioned, I prefer just using the crosstab editor because it's not dramatically more complex, and it's also more complete, right? You can do more things in the crosstab editor than you can do simply by clicking and dragging. And since you'll probably find yourself using the crosstab editor at some point anyway, you might as well use it from the start. At least that's my view. So let's begin again. This time using the crosstab editor. I'm going to remove what we have set up so far, and I'll start again building a simple crosstab. This time I'm going to put as my row headers two different levels. I'll put the product category and the product name, and it should be apparent that you can have multiple levels of row headers and you can have multiple levels of column headers. You can also have multiple measures, so it's fairly flexible. So category and name as the row headers, and then I'll put a date field as the column header. So the order date is going to be my column header grouping. Right, now, whenever you're dealing with the date field, you always have to consider what grouping level you want. All right, so do you want to group by year, by month, by quarter? And to set that, what you do is you click on that date field. In this case, it's in the column header region, and it has a level property, right, which is currently set to year, and that's what we'll use. But if you did want it to display week or day or one of these other date grouping levels, you would just select it from there. For the measure, we'll add in a couple of measures. We'll add in the product total and the product quantity purchased. So we've got a couple of different measures, and this means that each of these measures is going to be aggregated for each combination of the different dimensions, for each combination of the row and column headers. So that means for each category, name, and year group, we're going to aggregate the total and quantity purchased for the set of orders in that category and that product and that year. Okay, so that's the grouping that we're going to set up in this crosstab. Now, incidentally, you'll notice that just like for a chart, the fields are broken up in the left panel here, are broken up into dimensions and measures. That's either done based on simply based on the data type, or it might be done based on the way the designer of the data model set up the data model. In either case, if you need to make a change to that, in other words, if you see something here that's labeled as a dimension, but you believe it should be a measure and you want to use it as a measure, then what you could do is you can right-click on it, and there's an option, Convert to Measure. Likewise, for a dimension, for a measure, there is an option, a right-click option, Convert to Dimension. So you're not stuck with that breakout into dimensions and measures. You can change it. Okay, well, let's see the result of what we set up so far. Obviously, there's more properties, and we'll come back and look at some of the additional properties in a minute or two. But now that we've set up the basic structure of the crosstab, you can press the Apply button in the top of the editor, right? And this is the result that we get. So let's see if I need to make it wider. No. Right, so basically you can see that I've got two levels of row headers. Here's the category level. Right, so it's grouped by category. I can make this taller. Grouped by category over here, and then secondarily it's grouped by product name. Right, and then for each category, product name, and year along the top, we get the two measures. Right, it's difficult to see them because the labels are large. We'll fix that in a moment, but we've got the total and we've got the quantity purchased for each combination of category, product, and year. So that's that's kind of a basic crosstab. I hope everybody gets the basic idea of what that's giving us. So let's take a look we can make this look a little bit better. One thing we might consider doing is putting the two measures side by side rather than one on top of the other, and we could also change the labels, so let's give that a try. To make that change, right-click on the crosstab and select Properties. Right? Like every other component on the dashboard, Crosstab has a Properties dialog box. So we'll open that, go to the Advanced tab, and there's an option there called Summary Cells Side by Side. Okay, so just turn that guy on, right? And then that puts the two measures side by side. So rather than stacking them one on top of the other, we've got them side by side. And when we change the labels in the headers here, I think that will look better. So I'll change, just by double clicking, change this column header to say total, and change this column here to say quantity. And as you can see, we lost some information off the right side here. There is a scroll bar, right? So if you were in a jam for space, you could leave it this size and just allow the user to scroll to see all the information. But since, at least in our little example here, we're not really in a press for space, I can just make that wider so we can see all of it. Okay, and if you want to resize any columns, you could do that. Let's see if we can get a little bit more space for this column. And I might need to move this one out in the end anyway. This guy got squished. Okay, anyway, you get the idea. You can play around and make it look better. Okay, well, let's take a look at a couple other things just related to other modifications we can do to this crosstab. Obviously, if you wanted to give it a title to the crosstab, you could just click in the title bar and give it a name. Right, so that's pretty standard for any table. Same approach. Any component that has a title bar, you can change like that. You can change these labels here as well if you just wanted that to say category and this to say name. Again, just by double clicking and editing those cells. Now, one thing you might notice is that the date fields at the top here, they have this little plus symbol next to them, which is basically kind of an automatic drill down. It allows you to drill to different levels of the date. Right? So if I click on, let's say, 2013, it will expand that year and take me down to the quarter level. Right? So so basically what it means is now I'm getting aggregates not only not at the year level, but at the quarter level. So I've got the first quarter, second quarter, third quarter. And if I scroll this table a bit, right, then I'll see the fourth quarter, right? So basically, I've got a quarter breakdown, and if I click on one of the plus symbols next to the quarter, it then drills me down to the month level for that quarter. So it breaks out the 3 months in that quarter, and now I've got these aggregates at the month level. And if I click again, it'll take me down to the day level. I think is the last. Actually, not the last. So there must be another level beyond that, but I don't think it would be of any utility. And that takes me down to the day level, and you can see that there's a lot of empty cells when I do that. Now, why would that be? Right, the reason is that when I'm going down to the day level, there are a lot of individual days where there were no orders. Right, so if I'm looking at, for example, this looks like August 9th, there were no sales of this product called Me2 App Server on August 9th, and therefore there's no aggregate in that location. So when you go down to a certain level of fine resolution, crosstab becomes kind of less and less useful as you lose that ability to aggregate across a large set of records, and you just get down to the individual records. It kind of loses its utility. But anyway, the feature is there. Now what if you wanted to prevent a user from drilling down that far? Let's say you wanted a user to be able to start to view the aggregates at the year level and to view the aggregates at the month level, but at no other level, right? So what would you do in that case? Well, what you would do is you could define, explicitly define the hierarchy. All right, so let's back up out of this drill. I'm drilling all the way back up to the year level. And what I would do if I did want the user only to see the year level and the month level, right-click on the crosstab and select Properties, and then select the Hierarchy tab. Right, this tab is also available for charts, incidentally, because charts also have this drill feature. So you select the Hierarchy tab, and then you can explicitly specify the drill hierarchy for the date field. Right, so what I'll do is I'll grab the date field here and drag it into the right panel. And you can see by default, the top level of the date drill hierarchy is at year, and that's fine. Right, and then what I'll do is drag the date field again right below that date field, and you can see that by default, the next level of the date drill hierarchy is quarter of year. But in this case, I want to go directly to month. So what I would do is select that, and then select month of year down here at the bottom. Right, so basically what I have now is a hierarchy that will go, the drill hierarchy will go from the year grouping level directly to the month grouping level. So if I press OK, right, what I'll see then is I still have that drill symbol next to the year, but if I press it, then the next level that opens up is the month level. Right, I skip the quarter level, right, and additionally, there's no further drill levels available, right? So I can't go any further than the month level. Now that kind of drilling ability you can add not only to date fields, but also to fields like, to any hierarchical fields like category and name. You'll notice that these do form a hierarchy. In other words, any particular product name is within just one category. So what we could do, instead of setting up the crosstab with 2 row headers like we've done, we could define a hierarchy and just let the user basically set up 1 row header, just the category, and let the user drill down to the name level. So let's just see how we would do that. All right, so the first thing I'll do is I'm just going to modify the crosstab structure to remove that name row header. So I'll open up the crosstab editor, and here where I've got the name as a secondary row header, I'll just remove that and then press apply. Okay, so now it simplifies the crosstab, removes the product name, that column of product names, and then what I can do is define a hierarchy. Right, so again, I'll go back to the right-click on the crosstab, select Properties, open the Hierarchy tab, and then I'll define a new hierarchy. I'm going to leave the date hierarchy alone, but add a new hierarchy here that goes from product category. Right, so I'm defining a new hierarchy, product category, and then the next level of this hierarchy is going to be the product name, which I know is here somewhere. There, product name. Okay, so basically what I've done is I've constructed 2 independent hierarchies for this crosstab, a date hierarchy and a category/name hierarchy. All right, so press OK, and then basically what that gives me now is, just like for the dates, I've got this drill down button next to each category, and if I click on a drill down button next to a category, it expands it out into the products within that category, and it gives me the aggregates for those different products. Okay, so that's kind of the concept of using the drill feature in a crosstab, and like I said, it's analogous to the drill feature in a chart as well. Okay, I'm going to restore this to the way it was. I'm just going to remove the hierarchies and put it back to the way we had it earlier. So let's see if I can clear out those hierarchies, and I think then it's back to the way it was. Okay, so while I have the crosstab editor open again, let's look at some of the additional features in the crosstab editor. You'll note that down here, if I click on a dimension, right, there are some properties such as sorting and ranking. So basically, sorting determines the order in which the groups appear. So sort ascending means in alphabetical order, descending means reverse alphabetical order. By value ascending means that you're going to sort it according to some measure, and by value descending means you're going to sort it again by some measure, but in reverse order. So for example, we could select that we want to sort the product names by value descending according to quantity purchased. Right, so then the names should be sorted in reverse order according to quantity purchased. Right, so that's the That's the concept of sorting. Right, so these, right, so for these the product names, we should see a reverse by value sorting. Within each category, the name should be sorted in reverse order by quantity purchased. So that's the concept of sorting. Right, if we go back here, so let me remove the sorting and then illustrate what ranking is. Ranking is basically you select the top or bottom so many groups according to some measure. So it's a filtering operation. So let's try it on the category field up here. So I'm going to click on the category dimension and we'll set a ranking such as, let's say we want the top and just say the top 3 categories, right? Because we're dealing with the categories, I selected that particular dimension. So we want the top 3 categories according to, let's say, the totals. Right, so again, press apply, right? And then what we're looking at here are just the top 3 categories according to the overall category totals. Right, so again, this is a type of filtering called top N or bottom N filtering. Okay, let's just take a look at a couple more things that we could do in the Crosstab editor, and then we'll get on to some other things. So opening up the Crosstab editor again, let me undo the ranking. And you can specify, oh, I didn't mean to dismiss that, but back in there, you can specify also if you've got a top level group, in other words, a group that has groups under it, you can specify whether you want to show or hide the group totals. Right, so if I want to display the category group totals, then I would just switch this to show. Right, and then that gives me a total row here. So basically I get the totals for each category group. And then for measures, if you click on a measure, for example, if you click on product total or quantity purchased, you can choose the aggregation method, and you can choose whether you want it to be represented as a percentage of group or a percentage of grand total. Right, so different ways to represent the measures as percentages. There are some additional properties that you can find by going to the Options button in the Crosstab editor. This basically allows you to, first of all, specify whether you want a row total or column total. These are basically grand totals. So a row total would be a row all the way at the bottom of the crosstab that gives you basically the totals up the values across all the rows in a given column. And you can also select a column total. That would be I see the question. I'll get to it in a second. A column total is basically a column that appears all the way at the right side of the crosstab and gives you the totals across the columns in a given row. This also allows you to specify whether you want the percentages to be computed on the basis of rows or columns. Right? So if you specify that you want a measure to be represented as a percentage, do you want the percentages to be on a row basis or on a column basis? Let me see the question. The question is, can top-bottom filters be changed dynamically by users at runtime? And the answer is yes. So if I go back to that property, pardon me. So you'll notice that for the, let me close that. For the ranking property, there is next to it a little pop-up button. This allows you to set this via variable or expression. So the easiest way to do it to allow a user to set this is by making this a variable, and I'll try to illustrate that in a moment. And you can also find that pop up over here next to the number, so that could also be set as a variable, and also over here, right? So the measure, pardon me, the measure according to which the groups are ranked can also be set as a variable, and that means basically that a user would be supplying the field that determines the ranking. So in fact, let me actually show you that right now, because that was on my list of things to demonstrate. So let's say that just to illustrate, not all 3 possibilities there, but just to illustrate maybe a couple of the possibilities. Let's say that you want the user to select whether it's top or bottom, and that you want the user to select the number. Right, so what I would do is, before I even come in here, I would add the form elements that allow the user to do that. So I would add, I'll do this quickly. I'm not expecting that anyone is following along, so I'll just do it quickly enough that you can see it and not to take too much time. So I'll add a radio button here. You could, basically what I'm looking for is an element such as a radio button or a combo box that allows the user to make choices, I guess single choices So for this radio button, I'll right click, I'll give it a name and call it, I'll just call it top or bottom. You could also hide the, you could also, oh sorry, whoops. I wanted that to be the title. The title is what appears up here. So I want to call that top or bottom. If you don't think that would be useful, you could just hide the title. And and the name of the radio button I'll call top or bottom, but without spaces because the name generally should not have spaces in it. I'll create a list here, an embedded list for the radio button to populate it. And I'll just make the labels and values identical. So top, top, bottom, bottom. Whoops. Press OK. Okay, and right, so that gives me a choice. The user can make a choice of top or bottom. And then I'm also going to add a control where the user can select the number of groups. And again, there's a few different elements that I could use for that, but I might try something like a spinner. A spinner is this kind of thing where the user can select a number either by typing it or by pressing these arrow buttons. And so I'll also make some changes to the properties here, if it lets me. Where's the properties dialog box? Properties, okay. So so the name for this one, I'll just call it number groups, something like that. I can set a minimum or maximum here. Obviously, maximum of 100 is ridiculous in this case. So knowing that that there are 7 categories, I'll just make the maximum 7. Increment 1 sounds reasonable. Press OK. All right, and then the question is, so I've got these form elements. The question is, how do I get these to control the ranking setting? So what I would do is I would go back into the Crosstab editor, right? And I want it to control the ranking for the category dimension. So I click on the category row header and go to ranking. And what I want to do is for this menu here, right? This can accept values of top or bottom. I don't want to select it here. Instead, what I want to do is I want to use this radio button to set it. So I would select the variable option here and choose from, there are 2 form elements in this dashboard, so I have to choose which one I want to control that property, and the one that's going to control it is the component that I named top or bottom, which is this radio button here. So that will, the value the user selects there will set the value of this menu, which is either top or bottom. And then over here, where the user, where I would set the number of groups, again, I don't want to set it here statically. What I want is for the user to be able to modify it. So again, I'll select variable, and this time choose the number of groups form element, which is this spinner over here. So the spinner will be used to set the number of groups. I probably should have set the minimum for the spinner to 1 because I don't know exactly how it will behave if I select 0 groups, but let's give it a try and see what happens. So let me modify this and make the minimum 1. Okay, so let's try it out. So I've got the spinner here. If I move up to 2, right, and so this this is something that the user would obviously be doing. These are form elements that the end user could use. So if I put 2, then I get 2 categories. These are the top 2 categories. If I bump it up to 3, I get the top 3 categories. If I click bottom here, right, then I get the bottom 3 categories. If I move this to 2, I get the bottom 2 categories, and so on. So that's how you would make these properties dynamic, and you can make any property dynamic where you see that little menu that offers the option of value, variable, or expression, and you'll find that all over. Actually, you'll notice that you can have the user change the fields, right? So let's say you wanted the user to be able to change the fields that are placed on the row header. Same thing, right? You could switch this to variable and then provide a form component and give the user a choice of several different fields, and what the user selects then would be used to modify the fields on the row header or the column header or the measures. Additionally, for a measure, if you click on a measure, right, you can use that same kind of dynamic input to control the aggregation method and these other properties, percentage of, and so on. So it gives you a lot of flexibility. Now, one thing to point out here is that by default, you may have noticed, although I probably went too quickly for you to see it, but if you look in the properties dialog box for the crosstab, there is under the advanced option, there's a property here called Enable Ad Hoc Editing. And that's on by default. And basically, what that feature allows the end user to do is to use the crosstab editor. So just like we've been doing here, right? We've been opening up the crosstab editor to modify properties of the crosstab. That feature is actually available to end users by default. So even without, rigging things up this way. So let's say I delete these guys. It's going to make an error, and then I'll just have to correct. Let me just go back in here and yeah, because it's. Right, so now I have undefined variables, so I'm just going to switch this back to none. And I guess that was the only, yeah, that was the only setting that we had. Okay, so now I'm back to where I was, and without any user input, without any dynamic properties. What I wanted to illustrate is that if I preview this the way that a user would see it, and if I press the preview button in Visual Composer, then I'm looking at it the way that a user would see it when they view the dashboard in the portal. You'll notice that it still has this edit button up here, and that's available to end users, right? So an end user, even if they don't have any of those form elements that allows them to change things the way we just did, they can press that edit button and they get the crosstab editor pops up over here, right? And they can make any change in the crosstab editor that we could do as a designer, right? So if they wanted to change the category field here to something else, they could grab a different field like, I don't know, customer address and drag it in there, and that would replace the category field. And likewise, they could change the ranking, modify the ranking, and any other properties that you can do in the crosstab editor. Now that is a fair amount of flexibility to give end users, and as a designer, you'd have to decide whether you want to do that or not. I speculate that many people would prefer not to give all of that flexibility to end users. And if that's the case, then what do? Well, you just, as the designer, you go in and you turn off that feature, right? So you go to the crosstab properties and you turn off enable ad hoc editing, and then the user will not see that edit button, right? So, and in that case, if you still want to give the user some flexibility to modify the crosstab, then you would do it the way that I just showed you a couple minutes ago. You would add form elements and then set up use the crosstab editor as the designer to make those properties dynamic so the user can modify them. Okay, let me see what else I can say here. So that's basic. I think I went through all the basic view sheet crosstab stuff that I wanted to show you, except for one thing. You can export the data. Of course, you can. There's an export button in the title bar here. So when you get a crosstab into a form that you want, if you want to export it to Excel, something like that, you can press the export button, and an end user can do that as well. Okay, the last thing that I was going to say about this is that that you can go beyond what you get with the basic crosstab approach. So let's say that, let me see if I can put this back more or less the way it was originally. So let's say that you wanted to do something like, you wanted to add some more column headers here. You wanted to add column headers for, let's say, region, customer region. There's a field here called customer region, right? But you didn't want to nest those that field under the year. So let's say, so the initial way that you would think of to do that, if you wanted to add another column header, is you would go into the crosstab editor and you would do something like this. You would find the customer region, right, and then you would drag it in as another column header, right? So under order date, you would have customer region. But what that will do is that will basically give you a nested grouping, right? So you've got up here, you've got the years, and then under each year, you've got the two regions, USA East and USA West. And that, that would be fine in some circumstances, but that's not what we want. What we want is a couple additional columns on the right that just give us USA East and USA West, not nested under the year. So this is an instance where you run up against the limits of the basic crosstab capabilities. However, what you can do, let me undo that. What you can do is you can convert the crosstab into what's called a freehand table. Right? And that kind of breaks the limits of the crosstab and allows you to do additional things. Now, we're going to have a webinar on freehand tables, I think, in a couple of months. I think it's actually might be the last one of the year. So I'm not going to say too much about it, but I just want to illustrate how you can go beyond the basic crosstab And I'll just illustrate quickly. So what I'll do is I'll open the, not open the crosstab editor, but right-click on the crosstab and select Convert to Freehand Table. Now this conversion to a freehand table is a one-way conversion. That means that once I convert a crosstab to a freehand table, I cannot come back, right? So I cannot, I won't be able to get that handy-dandy crosstab editor again, because once the crosstab is a freehand table, you can only have the freehand table editor. So you do have to think, I wouldn't say long and hard, but you have to think a little bit about whether you want to do this type of thing or not. So I'll do it for our example, convert to freehand table. There's no real noticeable change except that some of the formatting shifted. That's just a consequence of the fact that it's kind of a different representation. You can reapply any formatting that got lost. And so what I'll do is I want to add a couple columns here that breaks it out as USA East and USA West. So I'll open the editor, but now you'll notice that it's not the crosstab editor anymore. Now it's the freehand table editor. And so what I can do here, and I'm not going to go into explaining all the syntax and all the capabilities of this. We'll save that for another webinar, but I'll do insert rows columns. I'll insert a column after selection. So this gives me another row here. And then what I'm going to do is find the customer region. That's the field that I want to break out as another couple of columns. Grab that, put it, let's put it over here. And I'm going to set the expansion for this to go horizontal. And then I'm going to put total and quantity purchased over here. So actually what I should do is I should put them side by side probably. This will be interesting. Yeah, I might need, well, let's see what happens. Let me just go with total. Well, just to illustrate. Product total. Okay, so I'm putting the product total over here, and basically what I hope to see, we'll see how this works, is I expect to see the region, the two values that are in the region field displayed side by side, and then the totals for those two regions. Let's see if this comes out the way that I intend. I don't really want to spend too much additional time working on it because we're running short. Okay, close enough. So basically, what I'm illustrating here is that what I've done is I've got now this other region field represented as a grouping field, right? It's not nested under the year, right? So it's independent of the year. So I've got all my information broken out by year, and then additionally, I've got my information broken out by region within the very same table. Right, and you can't do that simply using the crosstab editor. There's no way to do that, right? So the point that I'm trying to make is that when you want to do something that looks more or less like a crosstab, but seems to break some of the restrictions that the crosstab editor imposes, you do have this additional level that you can go to of the freehand table, and you can build out the capabilities of the crosstab by using the freehand table editor. Okay. I'll leave that there, and if you have any questions about freehand tables, come back in a couple months, I believe it is, for the freehand table episode. Then let's, leaving that aside, let's wrap up with some additional topics related to data worksheets, because everything we've been looking at so far are features of crosstabs in dashboards, right? And this is, it's an easy way to create crosstabs. However, you can also create crosstabs at the data worksheet level, right? So in the event that you need to create a crosstab and you want that data to be used across, let's say, many dashboards, right? So then creating a crosstab like this within, and I can try to get this back to the original crosstab by undoing that last change. Let's see, do I have it? No, that's still the freehand table. If I undo one more time, still freehand. Okay, I think I'm back to the crosstab. Yeah, okay. So, right, so if you have a data set that you want to put in crosstab form and you want to reuse that data across many dashboards, it would be a little bit painful to have to recreate a crosstab like this in each dashboard. So in that case, what you might consider doing is creating the crosstab in the data worksheet. So let's take a quick look at that, and then we'll wrap it up. So I'm going to open a new data worksheet. Okay, and what I'm going to do is, first of all, create a regular table, because the way that you create a crosstab in a data worksheet is from a regular table. It's one of the options under grouping and aggregation for a regular table. So I'll just find my data model here, and I'll build up a regular table, or data block as we call it. So I'll add, let's say, category and name and date. And total and quantity purchased. I could add a few more things, but I won't bother. And so basically this is just a regular data block of the kind that you would build in a data worksheet, and this is the data that it contains. All right, so this is just a data block, and you could use, obviously we've not going too much into data worksheets here, but when you build a data worksheet like this, you could use it as a data source for a dashboard or for a report. The question is, what if you want to get this data into crosstab form in the data worksheet? So what you would do is you press the group and aggregate button in the title bar of the data block. All right, and this feature is pretty well hidden. All the way down here at the bottom left corner, there is a switch to crosstab button. Right, so if you want to create a crosstab rather than simply doing basic grouping in the table, right, what you do is you press switch to crosstab, and then you get the crosstab interface here. Right, and so this is more limited than what we saw in the dashboard crosstab editor. You'll notice that you can have multiple row headers, but you can only have a single level of column header, and you can only have a single measure. So for example, if I wanted to try to get close to the crosstab that we had done in the dashboard a moment ago, I could use a category and name, for example, as the row headers, and then I could use date as the column header, right? And you can set the grouping here, right? So if you need to set the date grouping, you would set it over there, and then I can set a single measure, let's say a product total. Right. So you can see that it's a little bit more constrained than what you could do at the dashboard level, but the advantage is that when you do a crosstab at the data worksheet level, then it is available as a data source to all dashboards, so you might find that convenient in some cases. Okay, so if I press OK, right, so this gives me the crosstab, and you can see it's got the two levels of row headers, the category and name, and it's grouped along the column headers by year, and then I've got my aggregates for each of those combinations of category, name, and year. Right, so there's a basic crosstab. That's how you would create one in a data worksheet. Now, the last topic, and of course you can export this also if you want, if you preview it, right, either from the preview button at the top, or if you right-click and select preview, right, that gives you a preview of the crosstab, and then I can't, there's actually a button, it's all the way on the right, except I can't reach it because of the GoToWebinar interface. Let me see if I can find it. Right, so hopefully you can see it now. Right, there's a button there that says export, and that will export this to an Excel file. Okay, so for the last topic, let me go back to the design view here. Right, so for the last topic, I just want to address the issue of unpivoting imported data, right? Because sometimes when you're designing a data worksheet, you'll need to import data from, let's say, an Excel file or a text file. And if that data is in regular table form, then there's not that much to it, right? There's an import data option. Let me remove this. Right, so if you want to import data into a data worksheet, what you do is you go up to the new object button in the title bar, select embedded table. You create an embedded table, right? And then there's an option there in the embedded table called import data file. This is a slight change, by the way, from version 12.0. This is version 12.1 that we're looking at. In version 12.0, there was a menu option, a right-click menu option, but here it's in the mini toolbar. Right? So what you do is for an embedded table, you press the import data file button, and then you can select a data file that contains columns of information, an Excel file or a text file. And if that's just a regular, if it's just a regular table, then you're done. Basically, you would just select the file and import it. Now, in some cases, though, the data in the file might be in crosstab form, right? So you might have an Excel file that's already in crosstab form, and if you just want to import it in crosstab form, then again, it's straightforward. So I actually do have a file like that. So I'll press the select file button, and I think I called it pivot data 3, right? So there's an Excel file called pivot data 3 that I have on my system, and this is what it looks like. And so this is basically what the file looks like. And if I just want to, and you can see that it is basically in crosstab form. It's got 2 levels of row header. It's got column header. So if I just want to import the raw data just the way it is in the file, then I would just press OK, and it would come in basically as a crosstab, right? So this comes in basically as a crosstab. And so that's fine, right? Then I can go ahead and do whatever I wanted to do with this table. But in some cases, what you might want to do is you might want to unpivot the data as you're importing it, right? So in other words, rather than importing it as a crosstab, you might want to convert it into a regular table. So you can do that also, right? So if I, let me undo that. Actually, let me just blow that away and just create a new embedded table. Right? And so the last thing I'll show you is that if you want to import a file that is already in crosstab form, like that one that I just showed you, right, there's an option here called Unpivot Data. Right, so I would select that Unpivot Data option, and then what you have to select is basically how many levels of row headers are there. So in this example, there are 2 levels of row headers. There was the category and the name, right? So I would enter 2 there, right? And then this shows me basically what my result is going to be, right? So I'm going to get a new column here, right, called column 3 that gives me the year. Previously, in the crosstab form, the year was the column header, right? So in the crosstab, the original crosstab form that the file has, you've got 2 levels of row headers, the category and the product name, and then there was 1 level of column header that was the year. So basically what this conversion does is it removes that column header and just puts those values as a data column. Right, so you press OK, right, and then this gives me the data in regular table form. Right, so this is no longer a crosstab, right? And I could change that column header. It just calls it dimension, but if I wanted to call it year or something like that, now I've got that crosstab information, but converted into flattened, as it were, into regular table form. Okay, I'm going to stop there. I think I hit every topic related to crosstabs that I wanted to hit. So I'll stop there, and let me see if there's any questions. I do have to, unfortunately, have to end the meeting in a couple minutes. But before I take questions, let me just say, if anybody, if I do have to end the meeting and you still have a question, you know my email. It's david.fass@inetsoft.com. So feel free to pop me an email. But I do have a couple of minutes, so if you have a question about anything related to crosstabs, please fire away, type in the chat box. Nope, something popping up. Oh, I saw a hand go up and then it disappeared. Okay, but I don't see a question popping up, so I'll just wait another few seconds and see if anybody's wants to get in a question before I have to split. Okay, I don't see any questions popping up. Again, I apologize if anybody is frantically typing a question and I don't see it in the next second or two. Don't fear, just send me an email, david.fass@inetsoft.com. So we'll leave it there, and I hope everybody has a great weekend, and hope to see you back next month for the next exciting episode. Alrighty, have a nice weekend. Oh, there's a question. Oh, it's just a thank you. You're very welcome. My pleasure. Okay, have a nice weekend, everyone. Bye. Okay.